For us retro people, dictionaries are fascinating because they're more than one thing at the same time. A dictionary is a text, it's a tool, it's a model of language, and it's a cultural artifact. And one of the interesting things for me in ENeL was that different working groups approached dictionaries differently. A dictionary as an object had a different use value to these working groups. And even within ENeL, a dictionary was not the same thing to everybody. So I've had more than one conversation with fellow analysts in which it was painfully obvious that we were talking past each other. But that was the maddening and on occasion frustrating beauty of ENeL, because we were approaching different dictionaries from different points of view. And for us, for Working Group 2 as a group, we were a little bit on the weird side of things. We propagated retro as the new chic. We didn't try to impress each other with the size of our corpora, or for that matter, with the ultimate capitalist dream of producing a dictionary on a conveyor belt with 0 labor costs. We don't do much automatically. There's only so much you can automatize in producing a new version of a legacy dictionary. So we sit and we encode and go mad. And we looked at all dictionaries with all their idiosyncrasies and inconsistencies. And we kept thinking about how we can model and represent such dictionaries in the digital age so that they become tools for studying the history of language and culture. Because one of the main differences between... Don't tell me. Oh, no, it's fine. We're still fine. Because one of the main differences between a modern dictionary and a legacy one is that a modern dictionary is often a lookup tool. You use it to look up particular words. But a legacy dictionary, if it's used at all, is also an exploratory tool. You don't always just look for the words you know. You actually use the dictionary to find out about the words you don't know. And that makes all the difference in how we design, model, and disseminate our dictionaries. So the Working Group 2 had 2 main goals. One was to provide an overview of retro dictionaries, which we just heard from Katrin about, and then to provide best practice guidelines for digitizing legacy dictionaries. And some of it went into our training materials as well. But the big question that we dealt with was the role of TEI in this process. And as you know, TEI is a people like to talk of it as a de facto standard because it's not actually issued by a standardizing body, but it's a community project, a community initiative that maintains a standard for the representation of text in digital form. And it's used in digital humanities at large. Most of digital editions of scholarly literary works, for instance, that are produced nowadays are done in TEI. And the guidelines specify encoding methods for machine-readable text in the humanities and social sciences. And the TEI guidelines has supposedly become an accepted standard for the digital text, especially where there are concerns about long-term preservation, interchange, or interoperability. This is what TEI says about itself. Now, long-term preservation, it's fine, it's an XML format, I get it. Interchange and interoperability are, of course, much trickier. TEI is not an out-of-the-box solution for any of these things. And if you've ever taken 2 various dictionaries that have been encoded in TEI and tried to compare them, you would realize that each team used a different flavor of TEI, a different subset. And then you ask yourself, where is this interoperability? What is the basis for the interchange? But there are many good things about TEI. It gives you a vocabulary, elements and attributes to describe features, and it gives you a grammar, a schema which tells you how certain elements are combined so that you can validate your documents. And there are technical bits in it, how it's done using a so-called ODD. One document does it all, a literate programming language for XML schemas that was developed in the context of TEI. And as with any XML, you know, you kind of separate structure from typographical visual stuff, and you can use it to produce different outputs of your encoding data. So there's, what are the things that speak in favor of TEI? It's legible. If you give any lexicographer something like this, even if they don't speak Serbian, even if they don't speak the Cyrillic alphabet, they will know what this is. They will know it's an entry. They will find their way around it. Another useful thing about TEI is that it's not good just for describing, but for actually studying dictionaries. And this is the crucial point for us who are dealing with legacy data. Once you have encoded, encoding is not a goal in itself. Once you have encoded the dictionary, the more refined your encoding is, the more granular it is, the more stuff you will be able to extract out of it. So a simple example that I want to give you is from this Serbian, German, Latin dictionary. There are many words in this dictionary that don't have an actual direct equivalent in German or Latin. So the lexicographer used the typical lexicographic cop-out that says something is a kind of apple, a kind of bird, a kind of something. Now, for us, it's interesting to see what are the words that were difficult to translate. And then you can start thinking about analyzing them and doing some kind of culture. Are these the specific Serbian terms? They are not. They're usually names of animals and birds. But what was it so difficult for them when they couldn't be translated? And to extract that information, you write a simple XPath query, which you don't see the end of it here. You submit it to, well, we have an API, or you do it in Oxygen, and suddenly you get 977 difficult words from this historical dictionary. I will get back to this. This is from the Serbian dictionary portal from our view, but I'll get back to it. The point is, the more effort you put into encoding a legacy dictionary, the more useful it will be as a resource for kind of semantic, linguistic, historical, cultural research. So we know all that. We also know that TEI is customizable. You can localize it, you can rename tags, you can do all sorts of things. But that's also where the problem lies. Because as Ovid has taught us, vice is often able to hide itself by its proximity to virtue. So one of the best things about TEI is also one of the worst things about TEI. It is simply too flexible, which means that anybody can take TEI, do whatever they want with it, produce documents that are TEI, that are valid TEI documents, and you still end up with incomparable encodings of different dictionaries. I won't go too much into detail about the specifics because this is not the time for it. But there's 5 different elements in TEI to describe an entry. Right? You can use entry, you can use super entry, you can use entry free, you can use related entry, and there's even a special tag for homographs. So that's a mess. Of course, the reason why they did that way is because they wanted to make sure that each digitization project could, you know, perform its goals, and you know, they wanted to be as flexible as possible. But if we're thinking about interoperability, we are walking down a slippery slope. So there is such a thing as too much freedom, or this is what I call first world problems with TEI. We actually need more constraints, but they need to be agreed upon by the community. We need to identify patterns of use or crystals or templates that represent basic practices of encoding TEI dictionaries. And we need guidelines that will describe and promote the use of such practices. And this is where Working Group 2 comes in, because what our deliverable is not just guidelines, but something that we have called TEI Lex. TEI Lex is basically a more constrained subset of TEI, which prescribes precisely the kind of elements and attributes that you can use. It is not meant as a replacement for the dictionary chapter. We're not creating something that we think everybody will use in every project, because that would be madness. It's not realistic. But we're creating something that is a baseline encoding against which existing dictionaries can be compared. Because if you have several dictionaries that are in their own TEI flavors, all you need is to create an XSLT transformation that will transform, and these are very easy to do, that will transform it into TEI Lex, and suddenly you will have a basis for studying and comparing different dictionaries. So TEI Lex is, can be thought of also as a possible LMF serialization. It can be used as a pedagogical tool. It will be, I hope, become a component of a lexical data seal of a compliance, which is something that we started on working in Daria, and we hope to continue within Alexis, this New Horizon 2020 project. TEI Lex can be used as a basis for dictionary APIs and as a target transformation format for generic querying or visualization tools. And this is another very important point. Why do we need generic tools and services? It is because it takes more than a village to digitize a dictionary. It is because not everybody can afford developers. Not everybody can afford building an infrastructure of their own. And the technological gap, even within Europe, not to mention globally, is huge. And I remember one of my favorite memories from our summer school was we talked to the students, and they said, well, okay, so now we have this TEI dictionary, and how do we do that? And almost instinctually, you answer, well, you give it to your developer. And I remember our Serbian students would just roll their eyes and say, what developer? So there are all these countries and traditions, with rich lexicographic traditions, institutions that cannot afford fancy digital humanities / e-Lexicography developers. They don't have the tools. So what we need to kind of lower our technical expectations by offering and creating more generic tools so that you can actually give a summer school, have people encode a dictionary, and dump it into something that will create an online interface that will enable searching, etc. So this is what we are working towards. So currently, the document is around 50 pages long. We do need to do some more revising of it before we put it on the website. So by the end of the action, it will be on the website. And post-ENeL, the work on TEI Lex will be taken up by the Daria Working Group on lexical resources and, of course, Alexis. We will be testing it with more data at the forthcoming lexical masterclass in Berlin. And then we will also be moving from something that's a narrative document, a set of guidelines, to an actual schema so that you can validate things against TEI Lex. And most importantly, we will be actually working on some tools and services specifically for retro-digitized stuff as part of Alexis. And before I finish, I would like to give you an example of how that might work. Based on the work that we did, the Center for Digital Humanities and the Institute of Serbian Language, which was very much informed by these discussions in Working Group 2, we have launched our dictionary platform in the spring for retro-digitized dictionaries. It is TEI-based, stored in an EXIST database, it has an API, and it has a front end. So it has a kind of multi-tiered architecture. It does all sorts of fancy things with old dictionaries. Old dictionaries never looked this sexy. You can, we have these pop-ups for cross-references, because why would you go to another page to look at a cross-reference? It's a very 1990 internet kind of thing. Sometimes you want to see things in comparison to each other. We have, autocomplete drop-downs when you're doing lemma searches. But even more than that, you can actually click on this little plus sign to collect different entries. So you can actually view various entries from various parts of the dictionary macro structure in one view and across different dictionaries. So you can actually do some comparison. I think there's a lot of more work that needs to be done on dictionary interfaces, because a lot of what happens in our field is actually still very, very conservative and very much print-based. We don't always take advantage of the fluidity of electronic textuality when we design dictionary interfaces. Then what can you do? As I said, we have an API which takes XPath queries, so you can extract stuff from the dictionary. This is an example. We call this dictionary slices. This is an example of a word list from a particular Serbian dictionary that contains all the words of Turkish origin, Turkisms in Serbian. In this particular dictionary, you have some 1,900 of them. You can view them as a list, or if you click on a different button, you can actually get full entries. So you get a mini dictionary of Turkisms that has been extracted from this source. You can do things like geolocation of place names in this dictionary. So this is an entry point, another entry point to the dictionary, etc., etc. Now, why is all this important? Because we have already built our platform, which is TEI, API, front-end. Okay? This can be used, and I hope that we use this as a model for this kind of generic tool, which the only thing missing here is the very precise schema for TEI Lex. And once we have that, if we have enough people who adopt it, and I'm not thinking of big institutions who have their resources and who have their platforms, they're not going to switch to this. I have much less ambitious goals in that sense. I'm thinking about small languages, new projects, student projects, PhD theses, etc. If we keep working on TEI Lex, and if it gets adopted by the community, it will be very easy, well, it will be relatively easy to, within the context of Alexis, for instance, to develop these generic tools and services so that we come close to encoding a legacy dictionary in TEI and not worrying about the search interface or fancy visualizations or things like that. So that is the mission, that is the vision, and it is something that really has come out of the work in our working group, because from the very beginning we've seen that it's fine to encode dictionaries, but people want to do more than just encode. I mean, encoding is the slave labor we do so that we can reap the benefits and fruits of it. And I very much hope that we will be able to continue in this direction. And I'm thrilled that we have Alexis to support us in this. So that was just one example of what I hope to be the lasting legacy of the working group 2. In the end, I would like to leave you with one entry from one of our dictionaries from the 19th century. It's for a word that in Serbian is called velezele. Nobody knows that word today, I think. It is the untranslatable word. It was translated into German as Artpflanze, or Herbagenus in Latin. But the definition in Serbian, it says, some kind of herb that makes you drunk. I wish you all lots of herbs that make you drunk or whatever you prefer. For tonight, I think we should celebrate. There's a lot to celebrate. And for me personally, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.